I grew up outside of Washington, D.C., so I'm an East Coaster for most of my life. I did public high school. As Michael mentioned, I went to college at Brown. I did my grad school all on the East Coast. And I started my career in banking. So out of business school, I took a job in the management associate program, or like the high potential hire program at Citibank in New York. And I worked at Citibank for 10 years. I moved to San Francisco to be a part of a credit card business turnaround in the Bay Area, which was a great experience. After all those years in banking, where a lot of what we did in credit card was partnering with other companies to do co-brand cards and private label cards. I started actually in trade finance. So I started, which is letters of credit that help large corporations that are doing big infrastructure projects in other parts of the world, like pay for the import of the goods and services that they need. So it was very much on the commercial. They put cash, custody, and trade all together in kind of these big corporate banking services. So that's the side of the business that I started on. And then I moved into the corporate headquarters, basically. I did a staff function for a couple of years in Citibank headquarters. And then I moved to the credit card division, which was a turnaround at the time. So it was not a successful business. And I had a lot of people who were mentoring me at the time tell me I had the opportunity to go anywhere in the world with Citi coming out of corporate staff and out of the corporate center. Like, why on earth did I want to go work in what was renowned in the US as the worst performing division at Citi? I think the reasoning is, in that amount of crisis and chaos, like, they're going to give young people bigger opportunities and I would be able to accelerate my career and get further faster by taking on the hard problems. And if I could make improvement, it would be far more noticeable than incrementally improving an already successful business. But yeah, so I spent that chunk of my career in retail, and then I was there for, I probably worked in retail for like 7 or 8 years. And then, you could just see the impact that technology was having with, on commerce and e-commerce and retail in general. And we were doing a lot of things at H&R Block that were digital development of our products and services. And that really kind of led me to fintech. And my first role there, I actually moved to Seattle and took a job with Amazon. From there, I spent time in the Bay Area working for Lending Club, helping them to launch a credit product. And then I moved up to Portland, Oregon, and took a new role, CFO, of a new business, Simple, that was one of the first neobanks, and moved to Portland. And then I was there for a couple of years and got a call from a recruiter inviting me back down to San Francisco to take over from the founders, the CEO at Earnest, a company that focused on student loan refinance and student lending. And I was there for 3 years. At that point, sort of closes that chapter. So I stepped away from a full-time operating role. And for the past year or so, I now spend my time on a portfolio of activities. So I'm a board member at a couple of companies. I'm an advisor for a couple of companies. I do a little bit of angel investing. Michael and I were talking about the wine project that we've got going on with my family. And just recently, this past June, I became a venture partner at a VC firm called Core Innovation Capital that's based in Los Angeles. So that's kind of the overview of my career in a nutshell.
Did you make any decisions that you're like, this was a bad decision, but it led to something else?
I definitely made some decisions I regretted, but moved on from really quickly. I was just starting to network and had reached out to a colleague who had just taken on a big senior role at JP Morgan Chase. And the intention of meeting with him was really just to have breakfast and learn about his career and where he had worked and what he had done. And it really wasn't to talk about JP Morgan Chase, but we got into a discussion about what he was working on, and he offered me a job, like on the spot. And, it's JP Morgan Chase, it's, Jamie Dimon's got all this great reputation, the job wasn't really well fleshed out or well defined. I kind of took it at faith and I jumped at it, and it was just a bad decision. It turned out that the role really was only half baked. Jack meant the best of intentions in offering me the job and building out a team, but really they didn't have a role, and there wasn't a very clear mandate for what I was supposed to be doing. And it was a very frustrating place to be at that point in my career. And a recruiter called me about the role at H&R Block. And so I started to, in parallel, have discussions, and that moved really quickly, such that I was only at JP Morgan Chase for 94 days. And then I left. That it's like my summer, I call it my 90-day summer internship, because it was like July to September. But it was just, I think it's important to call it when it's not working out. I call it a busted play. I think you just have to fix it and move on, right? I don't think there would have been value to staying and trying to make it better. So I'm very confident I made the right decision to go. And the opportunity at Block was terrific. It was probably one of the more important senior roles that I had held at a company up until then. Probably, there were just a lot of exciting opportunities that came out of being there that I don't think I would have had the experience to have had, including the move to Amazon afterwards. So I think it worked out for the best, but sometimes you just have to call it. Well, and I think that is like, as I was reflecting on like, what are some of the themes, that build your network one is huge. Citibank operated that way. So it's probably a good place to start my career. Almost everybody at Citi found their career opportunities by networking. So there was like a rule of thumb that said, hey, you could go have lunch or grab coffee with anybody, anywhere, at any time, and all doors were open. But if you were invited back for a second conversation, you needed to tell your manager, right? So everyone was always out talking, learning about what was happening across the company. And if it ever turned into like a recruiting conversation, then you had to disclose that. But up until then, people spent a lot of time just learning about what was happening across the company. And so you're sort of naturally in a place where you're building your network. And I think I just kept up that practice, beyond, like always curious about what else was out there, what were other companies doing, what other opportunities were available. I had another mentor at Citibank who gave me the one piece of career advice that I definitely hand out to others, which is you can't turn down a job that hasn't been offered to you. I was sitting in my cubicle at the time, talking to a colleague about this role it was at Citibank Bangkok. And I was coming up with all the 1,000,001 reasons why this wasn't going to be a good fit and wasn't going to be the right role for me. And Steve walked by and he said, congratulations on getting that job. And I was like, well, no, I'm not. I'm just talking to them about it. And he's like, well, the last time I checked, you're spending an awful lot of time turning down that job, and you can't turn down a job that they haven't offered you. So, why don't you spend a little bit of time learning more about it and maybe getting it, and then you can generate all your pros and cons about whether it's a good idea and whether it's a fit for your career plan. So I totally take that to heart. So if a recruiter calls, I talk to them. If somebody wants to speak to me about an opportunity, I talk to them. And the worst that happens is you met someone cool that you've added to your network. You've learned about a company or about a role or about a way somebody does things differently someplace else. And best case, it may be that you found a better fit and a better leader and a better company and a better opportunity. So there's really zero downside. And I think by having built a large network, it's definitely paid off in what I do now, which is spend an awful lot of time reference checking founders and learning about new businesses and trying to find connections and, entry points to talk to new companies, and maintaining and cultivating a broad network has definitely been super helpful. I'll share as well that I am highly introverted. For me, what makes it comfortable to reach out to others is my unlock is just native curiosity. If it's something I have interest in learning more about, for whatever reason, that helps me be bolder and kind of overcome. Yeah, you would say otherwise, like, why am I out there like talking to all these people and doing all this? Like, that's not what an introvert, that's not behaviors that look like an introvert. But for me, it's just necessary to satisfy my curiosity. So my dad retired early in his career. He had always enjoyed visiting Napa, and even though he lived for almost all his life on the East Coast, he would visit Napa at least once every year. And so when he retired, my parents decided that they would take a look at buying property in the Napa Valley. And this is like the mid-90s, so this was a really long time ago. And things were expensive then, but not as expensive as they are today. And they looked at everything. They looked at raw land that hadn't been planted. They looked at land with grapes. They looked at houses without grapes. They looked at grapes without houses. Like, they looked at every they looked on the valley floor. They looked on the hillside. They looked up in the mountains. Like, they didn't know what they were looking for. So they looked at everything. And they found this piece of property that's in the heart of Napa Valley. It's like literally like the midpoint of the valley on the valley floor. And it was 11 acres, 7 of it planted in grapes. We are grape growers. So our primary business is just working with a vineyard manager to grow the grapes and then sell them to wineries. And we do that for both the white wine grapes and the red wine grapes. Well, we're mostly wine grape growers. We do hold back a little bit of the fruit, and we send it to different winemakers that are friends of the family who have made that juice into wine for us. And then we show up for the red wine, we show up at around Christmas time and with a group of friends and family, and we bottle it by hand. So we hand fill the bottles, hand cork the bottles, put the foil seals on, hand put the labels on, hand package it, and then uncork it and drink bottles over lunch afterwards to celebrate. And then that's kind of our friends and family. So we're not licensed to sell it, but we share it with friends and family. And then in the summer, we do the same thing with a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc. And I'm going to be taking care of that on Tuesday. So that's the story I was sharing when we just got on this call, where I'll be hanging out with the winemaker who, it takes us all morning. So when we hand bottle, we start at like 9 o'clock, and to do 25 cases of wine, it takes about 3 or 4 hours to go through all the steps that I just described. And we're a team of like 12 people working on it. We're going to, on Tuesday, an automated bottling truck is going to show up at the winery and handle a bunch of clients that this winemaker has. And that same amount of wine is going to go through the bottling truck in less than 20 minutes. It's going to be like, you have to like get your camera going and get the video going right away, or you miss the whole thing. It just happens so fast, which is just so crazy because it's such a fun experience to go through and do it yourself until you realize like what an excessive effort it is and how much quicker it can be done when it's automated. So, and how much quicker you can get to drinking the final product. In COVID, my dad, my brother, and I were spending more time together and decided that we might want to sort of take the next steps in the wine business and not just do a friends and family label for, a small group of folks, but actually start a wine label and make wine available for sale. We made a list of the winemakers in Napa Valley that we most wanted to work with. And we went out trying to get a hold of these people, networking our way to get a conversation going with them, and reached every single one of them. So there are 4 names on the list, and we reached all 4. All 4 agreed to come take a look at the property, which is pretty impressive that they were intrigued enough based on where we were located, based on Googling B. Sellers Ehrlich Vineyard and seeing that it was a good wine. And they all came out and visited. So we had the opportunity to meet with each of them. And we selected working with he's a world-renowned winemaker called Paul Hobb. So he's over there in Sebastopol. He's got a wine facility called Cross Barn Winery. And he is going to be our winemaker for this Ehrlich Vineyard family project that's going to launch in June of next year. So we'll be bottling in June of next year and probably releasing to the market at the end of next summer.